want to stop that.
And Ayla Skorupa, the PhD, just got her PhD from UMass, and she's a local person living in the Northville, Warwick area. And hopefully we'll be able to get a chance to go out in the field when the weather warms up, because it's not the kind of day to do any snorkeling. So we'll certainly want to wait for the weather to get a little warmer. So without further ado, here's Ayla Skorupa.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, so as Dave mentioned, I'm at UMass Amherst in the Department of Environmental Conservation in the Massachusetts Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit. And I just finished my PhD in December, and a lot of my work was focused on the brook floater, which is a freshwater mussel. And the focus of my work was really on population restoration. So that's when you grow mussels in the lab for the purpose of putting them back out into the river. And so my dissertation really focused on laying the groundwork for that, to try and understand what it would look like to do that in Massachusetts. But often when I presented my PhD, I found that I was already a step ahead of everyone else, because I was jumping to this population restoration component. And most people were thinking, well, why are we restoring mussels? Why are we putting all this effort into restoring mussels when we don't know why we're losing them, right? So some species are rare now, we're losing populations, there's lower numbers of individuals. And so this talk is a little bit about why that might be. And so this isn't something I focused on for my dissertation, but we've drawn a lot from the past 6 years of working with brook floaters to start to discuss some of these things. So the brook floater is a freshwater mussel in the order Unionida. There's approximately 900 species worldwide. They're on, I'm just gonna get rid of my own video so I don't have to look at myself. They're on all continents except Antarctica, and they can have these really fun morphologies and different colorations, and these can actually differ based on the river system, which makes their identification kind of challenging. But what makes these mussels especially interesting is their life cycle, which I'll talk about in a moment. So in North America, there's approximately 300 species. It's the most biodiverse continent. And as you can see, this is on par with amphibians and reptiles and even mammals. But freshwater mussels also have a really high rate of impairment. So there's approximately 30 species that have gone extinct just in the last century. So we're really living through this extinction in this taxa. Here in Massachusetts, there's 12 species of mussels, and half of them are unlisted, so they're not on the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act. They include the eastern pearl shell, eastern floater, eastern lamp mussel, the triangle floater, eastern elliptio, and the alewife floater. And then there's 3 species that are of special concern, and that's the creeper, the tidewater mucket, and the eastern pond mussel. And in Massachusetts, there's 3 species that are endangered. So that's the yellow lamp mussel, the brook floater, and then the dwarf wedge mussel, which is the smallest mussel and is also federally endangered. So even though we don't have a really high diversity of mussels here, we can find them in a lot of different habitats. So Some species are habitat generalists. We find them in the Miller's River, and they're also found in ponds. There's also the eastern pearl shell that we can find in really small streams. They do better in environments with less nutrients. Just want to try and move this down. It's okay. So mussels are also ecologically important. They filter water up to 8 gallons a day, and but this depends on the species, depends on the temperature and the flow rate of water. But large mussel beds are also really important in rivers because these can actually stabilize the substrate. So if we look at this mussel here, it's anchored into the substrate, so its foot is, we can't see it's in the sand. And then what we see is the siphon, so the in-current siphon here where it's drawing water in, and then the ex-current siphon. And so dense mussel buds really help to stabilize the substrate and serve as habitat for other macroinvertebrates. They also can support microbes that actually remove nitrogen from the rivers. Oh no, this is so freshwater mussels have this really unique life cycle, which I hinted at earlier. And how that works is they're separate sexes. So the male will release sperm, and then the female will filter the sperm through, which fertilizes her eggs. And these eggs develop into larvae, which are called blockidia. And they look like tiny Pac-Men. They're just about the size of a grain of rice. And the female mussel has a job to try and attract a host fish, because these are actually parasites. They need a fish in order to develop. And so once the mussel attracts the fish, it will clamp onto the gills and it will obtain nutrients. And it will stay on the fish for a couple weeks to a month, at which point it will drop off as a small juvenile. And this juvenile isn't yet filter feeding. So it's feeding with its foot, which is called pedal feeding. And then it develops and becomes a smaller version of the adult. So I'm going to show you a video of a mussel specialist trying to attract a specific kind of fish